Attacking a NATO ally is illegal. I would take us again back to the Budapest Memorandum. We who signed that agreement have failed to assure Ukraine's sovereign borders and sovereignty as a nation. We failed. We were hugging the bear. We thought that Russia will never be in the future a partner for peace.
From threats to annex Greenland to insulting America's brothers in arms, Donald Trump's ambivalence has forced much angst over the future of NATO among the Europeans. Some have called for Europe to go it alone, to the point of acquiring more nuclear weapons. But could the alliance in fact be getting stronger despite all this upheaval? To answer this question, I'm going on the record today with General Philip Breedlove, the former NATO Supreme Commander in Europe. But first, a brief damage report.
Well, if the US chooses to attack another NATO country, then everything stops.
I am very grateful that President Trump has stepped back from his original plans to take over Greenland. All of this is the result of our joint efforts.
The crisis over Greenland has rocked NATO and raised the prospect of the alliance falling apart. Pushback at home and abroad, as well as deft diplomacy from NATO chief Mark Rutte, has apparently persuaded President Trump to walk back. But a sense that Europe may need to go its own way is on the rise. For now, Mr. Rutte and NATO brass insist a divorce is unthinkable.
So when President Trump is doing good stuff, I will praise him. And if anyone thinks here, again, that the European Union or Europe as a whole can defend itself without the US, keep on dreaming.
Even Rutte was forced to push back over Trump's consistent dismissal of other NATO countries as reliable US allies. His remarks downplaying Allied participation in the US mission in Afghanistan have set off a wave of condemnation across Europe.
You are not absolutely sure that the Europeans would come to the rescue of the US if you will be attacked. Let me tell you, they will. And they did in Afghanistan, as you know.
We have never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They said a little back, little off the front line.
The political rupture appears baffling to NATO's military leaders, including US generals. At a recent conference of military chiefs, the top US commander in Europe sought to assure allies of America's commitment.
We, of course, are aware of the political discussions that are going on, but there was never a military dimension to those discussions that made its way down to us. So we remain strong, we remain united, and we remain ready.
We're in the process of creating a stronger NATO than we have seen since the end of the Cold War. This is pretty much NATO 3.0.
Is the Finnish president's assurance reality or wishful thinking? NATO looks poised to increase its presence in the Arctic, along with Trump's insistence Russia and China are contesting Western power there. A taboo against militarizing the North seems broken.
General Breedlove, thank you very much for joining us.
It's good to be here.
So, how big is the damage to NATO from the Greenland affair and also these comments about European troops in Afghanistan?
Well, first of all, this is a very important subject. And there were some very good comments in the little clip you just rang. And I would like to just jump on a couple of them. We have gone through some tough times, some tough conversations in the last several weeks. But across the last year or so, what we need to celebrate is that NATO is beginning to truly move out in developing its own capabilities. Whether that's because there's a threat of having to go it alone or not is less important than the fact that it's happening. We need to remember that in NATO, everyone wants to talk about Article 5. I like to talk about Article 3, which becomes before Article 5, which says every nation should prepare for its own defense and then create excess capabilities to give to the common defense of other NATO allies. And frankly, every SACEUR that I know before me and spoke to, and every SACEUR I've known since me and have spoke to, all want European nations to create more capabilities. We all took a massive procurement holiday after the fall of the wall, and that lasted for decades. So we've got a long way to go to get back to where we need to be.
So is there a paradox here that as NATO is becoming militarily stronger, the politics of NATO, if you will, is going the other way around?
Well, politics are temporary. I mean, we have an administration right now. America was before that administration. America is during that administration, and America is after that administration. The administration is temporary. America is not. We need allies like we have in NATO. I've said many times that the next 75 years of NATO are more important and are going to be tougher than the last 75 years of NATO. We have dedicated enemies. Russia is going across its borders and invading its neighbors. And we really right now have a theater level war in Europe. And so we need to get about our common defenses.
Right. You sort of preempted my question talking about previous NATO commanders and those that followed you in this job. So I was going to ask you, in your time, were you frustrated with this European free riding? So in a sense, are you now happy that this is finally happening? And would you then, if so, would you then give credit to President Trump that he actually made it possible?
So I would never use the term you use. I'm not even going to repeat the term that you used because those words don't come out of my mouth. Right.
Okay.
That's not a word that I use. Okay, so I like to talk about we all took a peace dividend. We all, my nation too, we underinvested in our defenses because we were hugging the bear. We thought that Russia was a partner into the future. What we absolutely know now, and some of us knew then, is Russia never was a partner for peace. Russia is not now a partner for peace, and Russia will never be in the future a partner for peace. And as soon as real thinking people come to that realization, we can get on with the things that we need to do. And to your other question, we have to be intellectually honest. No president of America has gotten NATO to increase its investment other than President Trump. We may not like the tools he used. We may not like the language he used. It may shock us in sometimes, but intellectual honesty says no president except for Trump has gotten NATO to increase its military investment and spending. And so there has been some bruised toes and some bruised egos and so forth. But the good news is that a broad swath of NATO and EU nations are now getting back to serious investment to try to catch up over the decades of underinvestment that they've been executing.
So you were just saying that Russia will never be peaceful, but the newly released National Defense Strategy, United States Defense Strategy, under this administration describes Russia as dangerous to Eastern Europe, but manageable. And Europe is judged capable of carrying primary responsibility for its defense. Do you share that assessment?
No. This document is a good document, But I just, we have to look at reality. Have we managed Russia to this point? No. Russia is running amok in Eastern Europe. We say that we're going to put sanctions and things on Russia and change their behavior, and it has not worked. I ask people all the time, okay, we got to do some more sanctions. I actually applaud that. I think we do everything that we can. But may I just point out that sanctions have never changed anything Russia is doing on the battlefield. Lots of problems for Russia created by sanctions. The people are suffering, the economy is suffering, the regime is being challenged because of sanctions and others. Those are all good. But may I just say it one more time? Sanctions have never changed Russia's tact on the battlefield. We're going to have to do something different to stop their belligerent, illegal, immoral, and inhumane war on Ukraine.
So what should the US administration do, particularly now that it seems that the peace process is stalled?
Well, there is some talk that the peace process is actually made a little progress in the past week. We'll just have to wait and see how that turns out. But the bottom line is, every time America has proposed sort of a peace way ahead, Russia has rebuffed America, rebuffed American leadership, and then in most cases immediately then attacked Kyiv and Ukraine with massive drone and missile attacks to make the point. Russia is making the point to the West that they are driving what's happening in Ukraine, not the West. We have to change that. We have to become in charge of what's going on in Ukraine. Right now, we are not. Okay?
So how?
And so
how
do we change that paradigm? How do we change that paradigm is we understand what Mr. Putin understands is force. Mr. Putin reacts to force. When the third phase of this 12-year-long war started, many call that, the invasion phase, this last part. When it started, Russia went in and took almost half of Ukraine. And then the West gave Ukraine what they needed to fight, and Ukraine defeated the Russian army in detail in the north, and the Russian army had to regroup and retreat into Belarus and Russia to get their act together because they had been defeated so soundly. So what we do know is when we give Ukraine what it needs to fight and the authority to fight with it, Ukraine can defend their nation. And that's where we need to go. We need to give Ukraine the ability to defend their nation, all of their nation, to include the Donbass and Crimea.
You're not alone in saying this. According to a detailed report in the New York Times a month ago, one of your successors as Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, General Cavoli, was dismissed by the Trump administration for insisting that Ukraine could still win the war and that Russia remained a threat to Europe. His successor, as we just saw, made a point of stressing that politics aside, the rationale for NATO is still very strong. So it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a bit of a discrepancy between how the military leaders in the United States and the political leadership see these things. Is that a correct assessment, or do you see some adjustment on the political side?
The beauty of what the military does is the following. Our job is to advise our civil military leaders, because in America we absolutely believe in civil control of the military. That doesn't mean that we always adopt in the decision phase what the politicians are doing. Our job is to advise the political leadership, no matter whether they like our advice or not. right up until the point when the civilian leadership makes a decision. And then if that decision is not illegal or immoral, we execute. We don't argue, we execute. And so right now, people like Pete Cavoli, who is brilliant, are advising in every chance they get for our nation to take a different tact. But the current SACEUR, General Grinkovich, I call him Grinch, I'm sorry, when he is given an order, if it's not illegal or immoral, he's going to execute it. And so this is important. We now need to be in the phase of speaking truth to power. And that's what Pete Cavoli and others and I have been doing for some time.
But is this an unprecedented? Is this divergence of views between politics and military unprecedented in recent U.S. history? Have you seen anything like that, I don't know, during the Second World War or later conflicts?
Yes, of course. Of course. There were lots of discussions about the D-Day, the discussions about whether Europe was going to be handled first or the Pacific was going to be handled first. There is a long history of military leaders giving advice that doesn't always align with the political, but there is also a long history of when civilian leadership makes a decision. If that decision is not illegal or immoral, we in the military execute it. We have a strong tradition of civilian control of the military in the United States.
So if there were an order to take Greenland militarily, would the U.S. military obey that order?
I can't answer for the U.S. military. I have answered in my own sense many times on TV already, and I'll answer it again today. We are currently in a treaty with NATO. That is law. If we're given an order to attack an ally, that is breaking the law. I would not take that order. Now, the president has the authority of abrogating that treaty, then the law changes and the dynamic becomes much harder for the military. But right now we have a treaty. We are an ally in NATO. Attacking a NATO ally is illegal.
Right. I wanted to get your view on the strategy, this national defense strategy. I want to come back to this because in a sense it reiterates President Trump's focus on the Western Hemisphere and also on the Arctic. So it's the geo-economic dimension of new sea routes and Russia and China trying out the Northern Passage, if you will. But there is also a very plain vanilla military aspect of it, which is nuclear deterrence and defense against a nuclear attack. Because as far as I understand, Greenland is an essential part of this. And I saw some reports that controlling Greenland would enable the United States to shorten a response to a nuclear attack by 11 minutes, which is massive in those terms, if I understand correctly. So again, is Mr. Trump now succeeding in forcing NATO to think about the Arctic as an important theater which has been underinvested just like every other aspect of NATO?
Well, we have been talking about the Arctic since I was the SACEUR, and I'm sure that my predecessors did. I'm just not aware of it. But we talked a lot about the Arctic during my time and every SACEUR since then. As we have, whether you're a believer in climate change or not, it doesn't matter. The ice is receding. And as the ice recedes, this opens up massive commercial interests in the North, but it also opens up more military interests in the North. And what is for sure is Russia has been investing up there. We have been investing less. But you skipped over, I think, something that's important is we've always had the opportunity to invest and change our status in Greenland. We have a 1951 treaty that is out there that gave us very flexible terms in dealing with Greenland and Denmark on what we in the U.S. could do up there. So militarily, this new agreement doesn't significantly change our position, but for sure, commercially, access to rare earth elements and things, that has significantly changed in the new agreement. And that's, I think, it was a big part of what we were after.
But speaking of the security in the Arctic, do you think, President Trump is arguing, we need to build infrastructure, perhaps deep sea ports in Greenland and elsewhere in the Arctic to really give NATO the infrastructure it needs. So is his argument that we need a bigger stake in this as ownership stake? Doesn't that make some sense? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the early 2000s there were some incidents around Greenland where the U.S. freedom of maneuver, let's say, was restricted or questioned.
I'm not aware of those, so I'm sorry.
Okay.
I do believe that almost everything we need to do in Greenland, we had militarily, not commercially.
Okay.
But everything we need to do militarily, the Treaty of 51 probably sufficed. Clearly, under the new agreement, we'll have more freedoms. And so, that I think is part of what the administration was working on. But I think that defense was far less of a change. But what significantly has changed is access to rare earth minerals and other.
So the commercial aspect. So the commercial aspect, you think that was okay. Speaking of security in the Arctic, how about the Svalbard Islands, which Norway only partly controls? They lie right in the middle of all these sea lanes, and from a security viewpoint, they're probably also important. You have 400 Russians living there permanently on that island, not really controlled by Norway or anybody, and it's all under a 1920 treaty. Should that be up for a revision and some NATO presence there?
Well, first of all, we will have to continue to abide by the treaty until it's changed. So I'm a firm believer in the rule of law and the importance of law, and that's the same when we discuss the 1951 treaty. That's the same when we discuss the Western failure in the Budapest Memorandum of 1994. We need to abide by the laws, agreements, and treaties that we have out there.
But
so
Russia doesn't. Russia doesn't care about treaties.
I know, and that's important. We have to start taking those actions that better prepare us to respond to Russia. But that does not mean that we in the West need to break a treaty or break the law. We are the ones that are supposed to show the world that the rule of law is important. So we need to work within the frameworks we have now and recognize that Russia doesn't. Recognize that Russia has no intention of sticking to these laws. Their track record of breaking every agreement they've ever made is nearly perfect. And so we need to anticipate that and prepare for that. And yes, there's more than Svalbard. There are other islands that we're worried about that Russia could go out there and seize, and now we have a problem.
So how to address this problem? Within the
Be ready.
treaties.
Create the capabilities. Do we have the ability right now to respond to Svalbard? Do we have what we need? I would say no. We need to make improvements. Russia understands force. If we are prepared to defend, or if we move forward into these islands to the extent that current treaties and laws allow, that is a message. We are not now taking advantage of all the opportunities that we have even among the existing laws.
Right. We're gradually coming to an end of the show, so if I could ask you for a quick comment if possible. One key aspect of NATO is, of course, nuclear deterrence, and this is where America remains indispensable to Europeans. But given how Europeans are beginning to hedge their bets, do you think they may be tempted to develop more nuclear deterrence on their own? Some of them have the know-how and capabilities. Sweden used to have a nuclear program. Germany is probably capable of doing that. Should they be, sort of reducing the risk of America walking away?
So this is not good news. What we see, and I would take us again back to the Budapest Memorandum of '94. What the world sees is that two world superpowers, three ostensibly even the United Kingdom, made an agreement with Ukraine that if they gave up their nuclear weapons, that those three nations would guarantee, or not guarantee, the word was assure Ukraine of its sovereign borders and its sovereignty as a nation. And what the world has seen is America failed. Russia not only failed, but evaded. The United Kingdom, while they have done some good things, they have failed. We who signed that agreement have failed to assure Ukraine's sovereign borders and sovereignty as a nation. We failed. And so what does the world see? If you have nuclear weapons, never give them up. Then we look at things like Iran and other nations who push people around with their threats of nuclear capability, North Korea, Iran, and remember that during certain phases of this 12-year-long war in Ukraine, Russia has threatened over and over with its nuclear capabilities. And what happens is the West backs up. The West backs up. So what the world sees is when you have nuclear weapons, people back up. So I have said for some time now that the environment created by not responding and working through these problems, but simply backing up, encourages growth in the nuclear enterprise. And I stand by that.
General Breedlove, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching. This was On the Record. See you next week.